American barbecue is not one thing. The word covers at least 5 distinct regional traditions that don't agree on the meat, don't agree on the method, and actively disagree on the sauce. A pitmaster in eastern North Carolina and a pitmaster in Kansas City are both doing barbecue. They are not doing the same thing. And if you ask either of them about the other's work, you will discover they know exactly how different it is.
For most of their history, these traditions didn't know about each other, or they knew and didn't care. A pitmaster in eastern North Carolina in 1950 wasn't thinking about Kansas City. The way you tell them apart today is the same way you would have then.
Where you are determines what's on the pit. Texas is cattle country, beef. The Carolinas were pork country long before they were anything else. Kansas City sits at the intersection of cattle drives and meat packing. All meats, every cut, every method. Each region answered the same question differently, and the clearest signature of each answer is what they put on it at the end.
The sauce.
Start in Texas, specifically Central Texas, where the tradition comes out of German and Czech immigrant meat markets in the mid-19th century. Butchers in towns like Lockhart, Luling, and Taylor were selling smoked meat off the pit as a way to move product. The same discard logic that governed Act Two. What didn't sell fresh got smoked. What got smoked got sold by the pound, on butcher paper, with no plates and no utensils. Eat it standing at the counter or take it out to a table yourself.
The seasoning is salt and black pepper. The wood is post oak. The meat is beef, brisket, ribs, sausage made in-house by the same butchers descended from those German and Czech immigrants. The smoke is the flavor. The rub is minimal by design. And the sauce, in the Central Texas tradition, is largely beside the point.
Texas pitmasters treat sauce with something close to suspicion, the argument being that a good piece of meat doesn't need anything on top of it. If you're reaching for the sauce bottle, the meat wasn't good enough, or you don't trust it to stand alone. Some of the most celebrated pits in Central Texas don't put sauce on the table. The wood matters as much as anything. Post oak is a species of oak, Quercus stellata, that grows across Central and East Texas. The name comes from its use as fence posts. The wood is so dense and rot-resistant that farmers cut it into posts and drove it into the ground, and it outlasted everything around it. Central Texas pitmasters didn't choose post oak out of culinary philosophy. It was what grew there. It was what was available, and it turned out to produce a smoke that is specific, not the sweetness of cherry, not the intensity of hickory, but something in between that the tradition built itself around. The ring of pink that appears inside a properly smoked brisket, the smoke ring, is not decoration, it is evidence. It tells you how long the meat was in the smoke and at what temperature, the same way a tree ring tells you the age of the wood.
The argument for Central Texas barbecue is that there's nowhere to hide, no sauce to cover the meat, no heavy seasoning to distract from it. What you put in the smoker is what comes out, and Texas Monthly has been holding pitmasters to that standard since the 70s.
Texas Monthly has been covering barbecue seriously since the 1970s. Their top 50 barbecue list, published every few years, is the closest thing American barbecue has to a Michelin guide, except that Texas Monthly readers treat it with the intensity of people who have something personal at stake. In 2013, Daniel Vaughn was hired as the first full-time barbecue editor at any publication in the United States. His job is to eat at every serious pit in Texas and tell you which ones are worth the drive. The list has turned small towns into pilgrimage destinations. Lockhart, Texas, population around 15,000, 30 miles south of Austin, has 4 legendary pits on it: Croyt's Market, Smitty's Market, Black's Barbecue, and Chisholm Trail. People drive past dozens of restaurants to get there. They wait in line at a meat market where they've been selling smoked brisket off the pit since 1900. They carry it out on butcher paper and eat standing up. Being named to the Texas Monthly list doesn't just validate a pitmaster, it can change the economics of an entire town.
Kansas City is the counter-argument. If Texas is about restraint, the meat, the smoke, the salt and pepper, Kansas City is about abundance. Every meat, every cut. The city has more barbecue restaurants per capita than anywhere else in the United States. And a sauce that became so dominant, it shaped what most Americans think barbecue tastes like.
Kansas City's barbecue history runs through Henry Perry, a Memphis-born pitmaster who set up a barbecue stand in a Kansas City streetcar barn around 1907 and started selling smoked meats wrapped in newspaper for a nickel. Perry is the acknowledged father of Kansas City barbecue. His students went on to found the institutions that defined the tradition: Arthur Bryant's, Gates Barbecue, Ollie Gates. The lineage is direct and documented. The cut that defines Kansas City more than any other is the spare rib. Not baby backs, spare ribs. The full rack, cut from the lower portion of the pig's rib cage, longer and fattier than the loin-cut ribs that most grocery stores sell. Kansas City spare ribs go on the smoker for 5 to 6 hours, low and slow, and the sauce goes on layers, mopped on during the last hour of the cook, caramelizing into a crust with each application. The finished rib is lacquered, dark, sticky. The meat doesn't fall off the bone. Kansas City competition rules actually penalize that because fall off the bone means overcooked. You want it to pull clean with the bite and hold together in your hand. The Kansas City sauce is what makes all of that work. Tomato base, molasses or brown sugar for sweetness, vinegar for acid, black pepper, cayenne, thick enough to coat. Arthur Bryant's sauce was so distinct, darker, less sweet, with a quality that food writers struggle to describe, that Calvin Trillin once wrote that Arthur Bryant's was the greatest restaurant in the world. He meant it. Bryant's served nothing except barbecue, and if you didn't like the sauce, you were in the wrong place.
In 1977, Rich Davis, a Kansas City pediatrician, created a sauce he called KC Masterpiece and began selling it regionally. By the 1980s, it was national. By the 1990s, it was the best-selling barbecue sauce in the United States. What KC Masterpiece did was take the Kansas City flavor profile, sweet, tomato, thick, and put it in every grocery store in America. If you grew up with bottled barbecue sauce, you grew up with a version of Kansas City. One regional tradition set the default for an entire country.
Kansas City also gave the country burnt ends as a menu item. The point of the brisket, the fattier, thicker end, comes out of a long smoke with more bark, more rendered fat, more intensity than the flat. Kansas City pitmasters started cubing the point, tossing it back in the smoker with more sauce and letting it go until the outside crisped and the inside turned molten. Arthur Bryant's served them because you served what you had. A paper bag of burnt ends, handed across the counter with nothing else, was not a menu item. It was what happened to the part of the brisket that didn't slice cleanly. Kansas City turned that into the thing people drove across the city for before they ordered anything else. Now move to Memphis. The Mississippi Delta, the hog farming traditions of Tennessee and Mississippi, a century of Southern and African American culinary tradition concentrated in a city that became a commercial center for the region, all of it points toward pork. Memphis barbecue is pork ribs, done two ways that the city has been debating since at least the 1940s.
The debate is wet versus dry. A wet rib is coated in sauce before and during the cook. It caramelizes, builds layers, becomes part of the crust. A dry rib is rubbed with spices, paprika, garlic, cumin, pepper, and cooked without sauce. Served without sauce, eaten without sauce. The Rendezvous in Memphis has been serving dry ribs in a basement location on a downtown alley since 1948.
The dry rib argument is partly aesthetic and partly philosophical. If Kansas City says the sauce is the point, Memphis dry rib culture says the rub is the point, that the seasoning and the smoke should be doing the work, that sauce is what you add when you've run out of ideas. The wet rib side argues that without sauce, you're missing the sweet-acid contrast that cuts through the fat and balances what 12 hours of cooking builds up. Memphis has never resolved this. Both traditions are taught, both are defended, both have the restaurants to back up the claim. The Rendezvous is dry, Corky's is wet. The city picked sides and stayed there, which is the most Memphis thing about the whole argument.
Memphis also puts coleslaw on the pulled pork sandwich. This is not decoration. The coleslaw is structural. It provides the crunch and the acid that the pork, having cooked for 12 hours, no longer has on its own. Remove the coleslaw from a Memphis pulled pork sandwich, and you have a worse sandwich.
The Carolinas have the oldest continuous tradition in American barbecue. If there is an origin point, the oldest unbroken line of pit-cooked meat in what is now the United States, it runs through the coastal South and the Carolinas specifically. The technique descends from the Taino people of the Caribbean, who used a wooden framework called a barbacoa to smoke and dry meat. Spanish explorers documented the method in the 16th century. By the time English colonists were settling the Carolina coast in the late 17th century, pit cooking was already an established tradition in the region.
The meat in the Carolinas is pork. Not because beef wasn't available, because hogs were the practical animal for the colonial South. They foraged, they reproduced quickly, they fed a family from a single animal. The whole hog, split, flattened, cooked over hardwood coals, low and slow, sometimes all night, is the Eastern North Carolina tradition. You cook the whole animal. You chop or pull everything, and then you add the sauce.
The Eastern North Carolina sauce is vinegar and crushed red pepper. That is it. No tomato, no sugar, no molasses. Cider vinegar, hot pepper, salt. The sauce is thin, acidic, designed to cut through the richness of a whole hog that has been cooking in its own fat for 12 hours. It is one of the oldest sauces in American food, and it is not changed because there is no argument for changing it.
Move west toward Lexington, and the sauce gets a modification, a small amount of tomato or ketchup added to the vinegar base, enough to change the color and add a faint sweetness. Lexington-style barbecue, also called Piedmont-style, uses pork shoulder rather than whole hog, and the sauce, called a dip by people from Lexington, is thicker and slightly redder than the Eastern version. Eastern North Carolina and Lexington have been having this argument for decades, and neither side shows any sign of reconsidering.
South Carolina is actually the only state with 4 distinct regional sauce styles: vinegar pepper in the east, mustard in the center, tomato vinegar in the upstate, and a light tomato sauce in the coastal lowcountry. It is the most internally divided barbecue state in the country, which is saying something given that Memphis still hasn't settled the wet versus dry argument. And then there is Alabama, which went its own direction entirely.
Robert Gibson ran a barbecue stand in Decatur, Alabama, beginning in 1925. His specialty was chicken, smoked chicken, an unusual choice in a tradition dominated by pork and beef. The sauce he developed for it was unlike anything else in American barbecue. Mayonnaise, apple cider vinegar, black pepper, a small amount of sugar. White, creamy, acidic, designed to be applied immediately after the chicken comes off the smoker. The cold sauce hitting the hot meat, the vinegar cutting through the fat. the mayonnaise providing a richness that no other regional sauce attempts.
The cider vinegar cuts through the fat, the mayonnaise providing a richness that no other regional sauce attempts. Big Bob Gibson figured out the chemistry by instinct and wrote it down as a recipe. His restaurant became Big Bob Gibson Barbecue. The white sauce stayed regional for decades, the kind of thing people from Decatur knew about and people from everywhere else didn't. It has since become known nationally, and barbecue writers and competition pitmasters now treat it as one of the essential American barbecue sauces. It took most of a century before anyone outside Alabama was paying attention. What the regional map tells you is that American barbecue is a series of local answers to the same set of local conditions. Texas had cattle and German butchers and post oak and no particular tradition of sauce making. Kansas City had a position at the center of American meatpacking and a man who had cooked in Memphis. Memphis had the Mississippi Delta and a city that never decided between wet and dry and so kept both. The Carolinas had the oldest tradition on the continent and the stubbornness to maintain it without modification for 300 years. Alabama had Robert Gibson and a chicken and a jar of mayonnaise.
The sauce is the argument. Every region has one, and every region's answer is different. And every region is certain theirs is correct. Kansas City put its answer in a bottle and sold it to the whole country. Texas refused to have one. The Carolinas wrote their answer in vinegar 200 years ago and haven't revised a word. And Big Bob Gibson made his with mayonnaise and spent 50 years being right before anyone outside Decatur noticed.
What they share is the method: low heat, long time, wood smoke, the patience to let something take as long as it needs to take. That is what all of American barbecue agrees on, and only that. Not the meat, not the sauce, not even the wood. Just the willingness to stand next to a fire long enough for something cheap and tough to become something worth driving across a state for. This is Pulse, Origins, produced by Singularity Pulse Network. Views expressed are our own. New episodes every Sunday. Follow us on @thepulsespn on X, the Everything app.
I'm Caden. The Pulse Brief is every weekday, 10 minutes. AI, space, crypto, cybersecurity, what matters most today? Find it wherever you listen.
I'm Knox. Every Saturday on Pulse Deep Dive, one story told in acts. This season, how AI happened, who really invented the internet, and going back to the moon 53 years later. New chapter every Saturday. Find it wherever you listen.